너 애기야 시집에 가봤어? 애기야 시집에? 몇 번 가봤어? 몇 번?
A 28-year-old mother was found deceased after a brutal attack, and even someone started a fire to cover up the evidence. But her 4-year-old child would survive to tell the story. She distinctively recounts and remembers who have done this to her. But was the man that she pointed to the real suspect? Or could her memories be mixed with other people in her life that she would point to the wrong suspect? This is an incredible story of how a 4-year-old child would solve her own mother's murder mystery. I love to learn and share these incredible true crime stories, so just a like in these videos, subscribing, commenting, engaging all helps. And today we have a big supporter of GRAZY TV channel. You guys know just by clicking and checking out today's sponsor really helps to continue this channel to go on. So thank you so much to Jackpot World. I go to Vegas a lot and I never knew how to play those slot machines. So now I can actually practice and know how to play them, and you can play them all at the convenience of your phone. Jackpot World is entertaining in a free game that brings you authentic casino slot experience. There's over 200 slot games with different themes. You could see these graphics are so beautiful. There's new slots that's released every week, and you can unlock the new games for free. There's many ways that you can get free coins. They give you like so much. For first time playing, I got 6 million free coins. You can also use my special gift code JWGRAZY to get $100 of more free coins. And a higher payout means you get to win a lot more. Hit that jackpot. There's also mini games like bingo, snakes and ladders, Monopoly game, collecting stamps, feeding pets, puzzles, just so much more games to play here. Not only that, you can play multiplayers or player versus player. You could attack other players' islands to earn coins. So join other players and make friends to steal some coins. It's available to download on Android, iOS, Windows. You can play it anytime, anywhere. It is so easy to play and easy to understand now. So if you want that authentic casino experience just at the convenience of your phone, go and download and use my link. You can get 6 million free coins just by starting. Again, it's free to play. Thank you so much to Jackpot World, and you guys know just by checking out the sponsors really helped to continue this channel. It was August 22nd, 1996, around 12:30 a.m. in the Huam districts of Seoul. In the middle of the night, when a lot of people were about to go to sleep, the emergency line would get a call saying that there was a fire that broke out in a villa. The neighbors would report of burnt food smell, then now thick smoke, and it seemed like the fire was not started that long ago. So the fire department's team was called. They hurried up to the 4th floor of this villa, and it seems like the door to this villa was already slightly open. The rescue team went inside through the black smoke, and the first thing that they heard, to their surprise, was a child crying. They would find a 4-year-old little girl, and there's actually a live video of this. And you could see she is covered in smoke. She seems burnt. It seems like she had some bleeding going on around her head, yet she was conscious and crying. Now, as the rescue team was holding her and bringing her to safety, you could see her literally pointing to her apartment villa and going, "Mommy, mommy." So this possibly indicated that this child knew that there was someone else inside of the apartment. And fortunately, only within 10 minutes, the fire was tamed and the rescue team was scouring the place, where they would find an unconscious woman lying flat on the floor inside of her room. Later, we would find that this woman actually was already dead. She has already passed, and it was odd because usually if there's a fire, the woman or anyone trying to run away would be found near the door trying to escape, but she was literally lying just flat, as if she was already gone before the fire started. Not to mention the drawers were pulled. There were like papers and things everywhere, where it seemed like somebody might have came in and wanted to find something or steal something. The child was taken to the hospital right away, and not only burnt marks, but the child was bleeding from the head as if she was hit. And the autopsy results of the 28-year-old mother stated that she did indeed pass away before the the fire started and found head injuries and wounds all over her body that was unrelated to the fire. Police knew that this was most likely a homicide and started to question the only witness that was there, the 4-year-old child. Now, this 4-year-old little girl named Mimi, she was half Korean and half Japanese. Her father was Japanese, and her father wasn't there at the time. It seems like the father was going back and forth from Japan and Korea often, so it could be that he was out of the country. So on the second day of the hospital, the police came in to try and question the little girl. And when asked what happened, this is what she said. Her first words were, 아저씨. Now, 아저씨 means an older man that is non-blood related, so technically it's translated to like uncle. Then she said, the uncle hit my mommy and me. He came during the day and at night. Hit with hand. Mommy, I'm scared. And right after that statement, very shortly, the child got really distressed. She started crying and did not want to talk anymore. Now, during the couple of days, police could not find any evidence of who might have been there. And this was back in the 90s, so you didn't really have DNA testings, any technology and things like that. So 4 days later, they would go back to the little girl, hoping that she calmed down a little bit and would give more information. This time, police asked again who did it. And the baby replied, uncle with the baby, or 애기 아저씨. There was a slight controversy within this case. Again, this was back in the 90s. In this day and age, I'm sure they would bring a professional child psychologist that deals with trauma and things like that. But back then, it was usually the police that still came and did the interrogation no matter how old you were. So just keep that in mind. The only clue that they had from this 4-year-old, you guys, was 애기 아저씨, uncle with the baby. So the police started to look around the family, friends, and see who the baby would call uncle with the baby. They trimmed it down to a couple people, but one man stood out. His name was Mr. Lee. He was 31 years old and only lived 5 minutes away from Miss Kim, the victim's house. Now, Miss Lee was the son-in-law of this older woman that Miss Kim, the victim, was close to. So the victim, Miss Kim, was also friends with Mr. Lee and his wife and the mother-in-law as well. And indeed, Mr. Lee was married, had a child of his own, and another on the way. And with the help with family and friends, they were able to get photographs of Mr. Lee, and this is what he looks like. So the police thought, well, this could be a potential, so they would take his photograph and would take it to the child at the hospital. Now, there are little criticisms where maybe the police should have brought in multiple different faces for her to really identify. It seems like the police only brought in Mr. Lee's photos because they were pretty sure this could be the man, and maybe they just wanted to get straight to the point. I'm not sure, but what do you guys think? So on August 27th, only about 5 days since the incident, the investigators pulled out a photo of Mr. Lee and asked, who is this? Mimi replied, uncle with the baby. Police said, this is the uncle? The child said, the one who hit mom. Now, this was not recorded in tape. Again, the protocol was a little different in the 90s, but this was the statement that the police gave. What they decided to do next was actually bring in Mr. Lee to the hospital for the girl to see. I don't know who thought of that idea, but so with police escort, Mr. Lee walked into the child's room just to verify if she would recognize him. So the girl was relaxed at the hospital, recovering with her father. That's when Mr. Lee walked in. Quote, it says, she gave the most shocking face, jumped up like she saw a ghost, held her fist really tightly, and went into a fetal position. And this all happened within 1 or 2 minutes since Mr. Lee walked in. I feel so bad for the little girl. She literally went through trauma multiple times now, but you know, police have to do what they have to do to try and capture the suspect as quickly as they can. After Mr. Lee left, the child started to cry and scream and tell everyone to please close the door, lock it. She was in a frantic, and her dad asked, is that the man? She said yes, and then she shut down and would not want to talk anymore. So noticing these odd, frantic behaviors by this little girl, they decided to arrest him immediately and take him for actual questioning. Now, as he was in the interrogation room, this was summer, it was hot, but Mr. Lee was wearing long sleeve button-up shirts, and he started to sweat because it was so hot. So police asked him, hey, why are you wearing a long sleeve? Can you please take it off for me? Mr. Lee unbuttoned and took his shirt off, and that's when police noticed that he had a lot of bruises and scratch marks all over his body, his arms, his torso, and including bruising in his eyebrows and his forehead. When asked about all these scratches, Mr. Lee claimed that it had nothing to do with Miss Kim passing. He was not in a fight. He showed them photos of him fixing the cable in his villa, in his apartment. He was like reaching for the trees and stuff, and he's like, oh, I got scratches from that, doing that. Regarding the bruises on his forehead, he claims that these marks were because he hit his head under the table while taking care of the baby. Regarding his swollen and bruised eyebrow area, he did not know where that came from. There was also fingerprint marks on his neck, like somewhere here. When asked about that, he claims, oh, me and my wife, we were trying to do some adult time and she scratched me. I mean, it's a little suspicious of all these fresh bruises and marks. Could it be that he was potentially in a struggle, a fight, somebody trying to fight back? Mr. Lee also strongly denied and said that he doesn't even really know Miss Kim that well and had no business or money exchanged ever. Police did try to keep him arrested and in jail until the investigation was finished, but unfortunately, the prosecutors said that there was not enough physical evidence to keep him behind bars, and they could not rely on the 4-year-old's witness statement just yet. So he was technically set free. So police decided to dig deeper, and they found some suspicious bank account activity with Mr. Lee and Miss Kim. It was actually a lie that Miss Kim and Mr. Lee never had any money exchange or business going on. In Miss Kim's diary and in her financial statement, she wrote that she actually borrowed Mr. Lee close to $8,000. So she had a check that was written to his name, and it seemed like she was writing down every time he would pay back this $8,000, which was paid in full. But it wasn't just that. Mr. Lee started to borrow a lot more money from Miss Kim. When questioned about this, Mr. Lee said, "To be honest, without my wife's knowledge, I did borrow money from Miss Kim." This is when things get pretty tricky. Police found that Miss Kim had a bank account, but it was an account under Mr. Lee's wife. So I guess back then in the 90s, you were able to have bank accounts under somebody's name, somebody else's name, but it was like you were able to have this joint account or something like that. Like back in the days, bank accounts, at least in South Korea, was very lenient. They didn't even sometimes check IDs and things like that. But the day that she was killed, on August 22nd, ironically, was the day that the bank had stopped any access of money to that bank account of Mr. Lee's wife and Miss Kim's joint account. Police also found that Mr. Lee had borrowed about $10,000 from the bank previously and used another $10,000 from his wife's account. And he was actually in a lot of debt, over $20,000. And is it a coincidence that the day that Miss Kim passed away was the day that the last loan repayment was due? So could it be that Mr. Lee, who was so careless, fearless about borrowing other people's money, didn't want to pay that back? Was he angry that the bank account has closed any access for him to get money into? Was he bitter at the person that has helped him out, no longer wanted to lend him money? Or could it mean that if Miss Kim passed away, technically it's like also still her account or something, so maybe he didn't have to pay the money back if the person passed away? Police also put him under a lie detector test. There were 4 questions regarding Miss Kim's passing, and he obviously all said, no, I was not the murderer, no, I wasn't there, but all the questions, it showed that he was deceptive. Neighbors also recounts that a little earlier that night, around 9:20 p.m., they heard a woman screaming and a kid crying. They also heard slamming sounds. It seemed like the kid was maybe running around, but they thought, well, maybe the couple upstairs are just having a couple fights. But police believe this was when the actual crime took place, when Miss Kim was murdered and attempted murder of her daughter. Mimi, the little girl, confessed and said that the man came in earlier during the day and at night. So police believe that Mr. Lee might have came to the house earlier during the day, maybe discussed something about the money. Hey, why can't I access it? And then he got angry and he came back at 9 p.m. to murder the mother and the child. But Mr. Lee said, wait a minute, I do have an alibi. He claims around 9 p.m. he was with his wife. They were watching TV and his wife said, hey, I'm craving some hamburgers because she was pregnant. So he decided to just leave without telling her to kind of surprise her. her pregnancy cravings and decided to take a taxi to the fast food area to get some hamburgers, then took a taxi again to the supermarket to get some apples. Then he says that he bought $4 worth of meat for the baby. When trying to confirm this, the supermarket staffs say that, well, yeah, there was a man, it seemed like it, but they couldn't really remember the exact date because there were many customers, you know, it's not like they're gonna remember one specific person. And even if he did go to the supermarkets, technically his house was only 5-minute walk from Miss Kim, the victim's house, so he could have gone in and out and still went to the supermarket. Mr. Lee claims that after he got the groceries, he went back home, stayed home, and around 12 a.m. is when his relatives came home and opened the door for them. So his relatives does remember that around 12 a.m. when they came back home, that Mr. Lee did open the door for them. The relatives do not remember if Mr. Lee came in with them right away or if he came in a couple minutes later, but police believe that because it was only a 5-minute walking distance to Miss Kim's house, he could have opened the door, told the relatives, hey, I'm gonna, have a quick smoke break, literally walked or ran to her house within 3 minutes, started a fire, then quickly came back. So that could have only been like 15-20 minutes. So police are saying that 12 a.m. to 12:20 a.m. when the fire was started, it was possible that Mr. Lee could have traveled there and came back. Now, why did he go back? Was he anxious that he might have left some evidence, or maybe that the victims were still alive? Really incredible, but I'm guessing that the little girl Mimi, if this was true, from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m., she might have been unconscious, but the neighbors did not hear the child screaming or crying after that. So she could have been unconscious for hours, even up to the point when Mr. Lee came back to start the fire. Police knew that they needed more evidence, so on September 7th, Mimi would come to a hotel to do an official investigation, tape recorded this time by the police. She then again consistently, since the day of the incident, she said, the uncle with the baby, 애기 아저씨.
진술을 들었습니다.
여러분 엄마 건강하시다.
아저씨,
누구는 아저씨?
이게 아저씨.
얘기하시라고?
Police then would show her a photograph of Lee again. And in this video, you could see her immediately crying and putting her face like this. Then police ask her, have you been to his house and how many times? And she kind of points like this. Maybe she's saying a couple times. What did he do to you that day? That's when she would make this pinching little motion with her little hands, indicating a possible choking. Then asked her to kind of show it to her father. And crazy enough, the autopsy also stated that she has been choked.
할머니랑 또 누구 오고?
엄마랑
어떻게 해서 그 아저씨가? 병원에 왔던 아저씨가? 너랑 목 조이고 엄마는?
Police now took the child to the streets and asked her, hey, if you've been to the house, can you point how to get there? You could see the tapes of her literally pointing the officers and her father to where this 애기 아저씨, uncle with the baby's house was. And it's incredible because she's 4 years old and she remembers exactly how to get there. And guess what? By the time that they arrived and she pointed, this is the uncle's house, guess whose house it was? It was Mr. Lee's freaking villa. And I guess they wanted to question the baby again. I don't know, maybe because it wasn't enough recorded, but on November 22nd, they made the father ask the little girl again on voice recording tape. But this could be because they wanted the child to be consistent. They did not want 1 or 2 statements. They wanted her throughout different months and time for her to really recollect and not change the statement, because that would mean that her memories might be off.
ここでカンカンした？どこ？
みなきの部屋。みなきの家あって。
カンカンした？ここでカンカンした？
ここでカンカンした。ダメダメ。じゃやめれ。
いい。ちゃんとパパいるから大丈夫。
やめれ。
どうしてみなきの部屋に行った？애기 아저씨。
엄마가 네 살려주세요.
That's all she would say, and then would start to cry. Now, the preparation of all of this and getting the investigation took 2 years. And in 1999, when Mimi turned 7 years old, that's when the official trial began. And in this trial, they decided to bring the little girl and have her questioned in front of the judge. The judge would ask her same questions. Who did it? Do you remember? And she was consistent. And this is when now the court decided to bring in Mr. Lee to, I guess, try to have her point to the suspect. And when Mr. Lee walked into the courtroom, according to all the witness statements, they say that the little girl ran and hid under the desk, shivering and crying, even after all these years, only 3 years. But now Lee, the suspect's family, kind of questioned this. They were like, well, what if the little girl was coached? Because that is a high possibility, especially if she's so young. If their relatives went up to her and said, who was it? Was it this uncle? Was it that uncle? Did he do it? And the baby might be like, yeah, like, it was him. And then they would go by that every statement, and maybe her memories were construed and like she kind of had that memory implanted inside of her. Other experts looking at the videotapes and footages say that, well, this kid really shows the behaviors of PTSD. Every time she looks at this one particular person, that's when she reacts at a such high distress that she does not show with anybody else. So this is credible. On November 26, 1999, the court did accept Mimi's statements, and they did find her credible. Lee was finally sentenced to life imprisonment. He did appeal 2 times, and it went to the high court, but all of them were denied. So the court and everybody did believe and see her statements as credible. So what do you guys think? Do you think Mimi's memories were construed? Was something implanted in her? Did they question it wrong? Or did Mimi see what she saw and she knew exactly who the murderer was? And think about how Mr. Lee probably felt when he saw the child alive and got that news. I'm sure he was peeing in his pants. This story kind of reminded me of the story that I did with this little boy, where in South Korea, a man had literally thrown acid on this little boy. Now, unfortunately, in that case, the little boy was turned, so he didn't see the person's face, but he does say that he remembers the ajashi, the uncle's voice. They did have somebody in mind who could have done it, but because the little boy, like his statements was considered not credible because he was so young, that unfortunately in that little boy's case, the statement was not taken seriously. But if his statements was taken seriously, like in this case, what do you think would have happened? Do you think that murder would have been solved? Because that boy, little Tae, he ended up passing away due to his injuries. And still decades later, nobody knows who did this to him, and the murderer got away. But let me know what you guys think, and see you guys in my next video.